So Shaz made some comments about our video that Chris and I did on Randall N Baer, and I just wanted to comment to some of the things he said. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is paraphrase here what Shaz is saying, and then do my own rebuttal at the end of the clip.
Now, that is just a totally ridiculous theory to have, and I'll tell you why. Because this guy was riding the crest of a wave of the New Age movement.
Shaz is claiming that Baer would have made more money staying a New Ager because it was the crest of the New Age movement. So if he wanted to cash in on anything, he could have done a better job doing that as a New Ager than as a Christian. I disagree for two main reasons. Number one, preachers on average from the Christianity and Christian perspective have a larger audience and make more money on average than your average New Ager does. Number two, we're not talking about the crest of the New Age movement. That would have been the 1960s, maybe 1969, early 70s. 1989 was actually the crest of the Satanic Panic, when people were becoming more conservative and more afraid of ideas that were considered to be quote-unquote New Age. Now, in Shaz's first video, he says that Baer was an influential leader in the New Age movement, and here he reiterates his point that he was a very popular person during his time in the New Age movement.
He was a speaker, he packed places out, he was widely recognised. You can call him a leader. He calls himself a leader in the book, which you'd have known if you'd have read it. Other people recognised him as a leader as well, and very influential in his day. So I'm not surprised that you guys haven't heard of him as well, by the way, because he was around in the 80s.
If Baer were as influential as he and Shaz claimed him to be, then his teachings would have still hold a little bit more universal value, in my opinion. Shaz says that, he was around in the late 80s, and that's why we haven't heard of him. But that's absolutely ridiculous, because most of the people on my bookshelf wrote in the late 80s, and I still know them even if they're dead. Scott Cunningham, for example, he died, I think, in the early 80s, and, everybody knows Scott Cunningham in the witchcraft community. Not to mention, Aleister Crowley. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to say that just because somebody died, or wrote in a different time period, that if he was actually, influential, we would still have known of him. And of course, if nobody knows of him now, chances are not that many people knew of him back then, and that's why his books didn't sell that well, and why he didn't really make that much money. Anybody can pack a house to talk, but if you're not generating that much revenue, then you're not going to make that much money and therefore not be that successful as a New Age, speaker, talker, teacher, whatever. You're not going to be able to use that as your career. I've packed houses before, but that was when, I was speaking on a love donation basis. I didn't require money from people.
When he was in the New Age movement, he cashed in. And he says in this book that nothing in the New Age movement is free, and you should know this, and other people who are involved in these practices and go to these gurus and practitioners and healers and so on will tell you this. Nothing is free in the New Age movement.
This statement right here is one of the major reasons why someone like Randall N Baer could not be considered credible. Right now, in this statement, it seems to me that he is playing to his audience and trying to make it seem like the New Age movement is a predatory thing that preys on people who are seeking spiritual development and are really running to these vultures that are just trying to prey on their money. But really, that's not true at all. There are many things in the quote-unquote New Age movement that are free. Now, people will define the term New Age differently, but really, when it comes to people, especially from the Christian perspective, when they call something New Age, they're also referring to New Age faith like Wicca and things like that. In that respect, I direct you to the Circle Sanctuary website. Circle Sanctuary, which has been open since before 1989. They've been open, I think, since the early 80s. They've been doing low-cost or free healing groups, workshops, and other sorts of help for decades. And they are probably under what you would consider a definition of New Age, although I wouldn't. For me, New Age, and New Age practices are really old practices that, have been, kind of brought to new light. For example, meditation and planetary work and chakras, those things are all thousands of years old. Those things are older than Christianity. So to call them New Age isn't really very truthful. But really what they have been is they've been brought to a new audience that may not ascribe to that faith from where those things came from, but still find them to be interesting and that they work and so forth and so on. So for example, crystal healing has been around since the Vedic sages, which are, 5,000 or more years old. But, the reason they're considered New Age is because it's been divorced from its Hindu and Vedic origins and brought to a new audience that doesn't consider themselves to be from that cultural identity. So that's why things are considered New Age to me. But, to say that there's nothing free in the New Age is absolutely wrong, completely false, and it isn't now, and it hasn't been in its time. Here Shaz starts to talk about Baer's experience as if he has first-hand knowledge of it.
And then this experience interrupted his little illusion, and the layer was pulled back whilst he was having his meditation session by a strong force which he later identified as being Christ, rolled back the veil of this glittery illusion of the New Age movements whilst he was in meditation, being flooded with all this wonderful light and colours and everything, and he saw the hideous demon faces behind the deception of the New Age movement.
So you're hitting on one of the major issues of why I don't think this is credible. And it goes further than just the money, but the similarity that Randall N Baer's testimony that I've heard from you can be compared to other testimonies of people who are obviously cashing in. And I'll give you a couple of examples of Christians who speak to Christian audiences about the occult and the New Age, witchcraft, what have you, and make these ridiculous claims as to what has happened to them and their experiences, while they have no evidence to back it up, and usually their knowledge comes straight from Christian propaganda sources. And the first source that I'm going to give you for this is Carol Carnacki. Carol Carnacki makes her money speaking to Christians and writing books about her quote-unquote experiences in the occult. But really, when she starts talking about her knowledge of witchcraft, it all comes from obvious Christian sources and not historical or knowledgeable sources within the pagan community, because no one who actually believed those things or knew those things about the pagan community would stay being part of that religion if those things were actually true, but they're not. For example, she said that, Druids were into, drinking virgin blood and things like that, and they prayed to the god Samhain on Halloween. That's absolutely not true. In fact, it comes straight from Christian propaganda. And she's rehashing this to a Christian audience, and like I said in my last response, playing to her Christian audience to gain credibility for them, because the more she bashes witchcraft, the occult, the New Age, and so forth and so on, the more she gains rapport with her audience. Now, the next person I'm going to talk about wasn't in the New Age movement, but they supposedly had an encounter with somebody who was a witch in their coven who came into their church. And I was going to tell you the story myself, but really it makes better sense if I just let him explain it to you. So here's a clip from Bobby Connors talking about the witch that interrupted his ministry.
And they told me that you told a powerful story about a witch.
Yeah, let me tell you about that. I'll talk to you about that. Well, I'm tired of these little Wicca wannabes coming to the house of God. Listen. There's going to come a day you will not darken the door of the house of God. There'll be such an arena of the glory of God. Listen, get you killed trying to come in the house of God. But anyway, I'm off in a meeting, doing a meeting, and I'm up here preaching. And a whole coven marches in. They don't come in clandestine. They march in. Just march in and stand against the wall. Lord said to me, he said, what you going to do about that? I said to him, what are you going to do about it? See, that's what you got to do, synchronize the motives here. And he said, I want you to go confront it. Most time I won't do that. I won't let a few steal from many. But he said, I want you to confront it. So I go over there. There they are. So I said to the leader, are you the leader? Yes. I said, why are you here? Very cold, very calculated. Said, we're here to shut down this meeting. I said, oh, you can't do that. They said, yes, that's why we're here. I said, you can't do that. I said, now you're the leader. And they all said, yes, she's the leader. I said, okay, well, do your stuff. Do your stuff. And now everybody's watching. I mean, everybody's watching. She does her stuff. Her, hicking and hacking and stuff like that. And I'm still standing because greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. Because Isaiah 54:17 is true. No weapon formed against you will prosper. And every tongue that rises up against you, you can condemn. This is your inheritance from the Lord. So anyway, she does her stuff. I'm still standing. All of her people are looking. And so I said to them again, is this the person you're following? Yes. I said, okay, you through doing your stuff? She said, yes. I stick my hand out, this hand right here. I stick my hand out just like this. Don't touch her. Stick my hand out just like this. Listen, guys, she's caught up, pushed up, approximately 8 feet up on the wall. She's hung to the wall and screaming like a stuck pig. I mean screaming, screaming, screaming. I have never touched her. She's up against the wall, stuck to the wall, and screaming. Elevated. It just swung her up to the wall. She's pinned, screaming. In a minute, boom, she falls down. She looks like somebody in a convulsion. She's rolling and frothing. And finally, I said, now, look, this is your leader. And I said, no power to resist the things of God.
Now, do you honestly believe that what Bobby Connors said actually happened? I mean, I've tried to contact him myself. I've contacted him on his website. I made a video to him, and I tried to look up information for this actually happening. And I haven't been able to find any corroborating evidence, nor has he offered to give any, that this actually happened. So all I can assume is that it didn't actually happen, just as, we pretty much debunked what Carol Kornacki said, because it was absolute bunk. Her history was absolute trash. And when it comes to most ex-occultists, and unfortunately you included Shaz, the information that you give as to your quote-unquote occult experiences is very, very vague. And when people ask you questions about what you did, your practice of the occult and stuff like that, sometimes you just simply refuse. And you did actually simply refuse for us. So, we're left to assume that really what you're trying to do is write about this so that you can be a preacher, so that you can speak to other people, so you can make money off your website, make money off your books, and be an influential person within the Christian community, because you weren't an influential person in the New Age community, or you were never in the New Age community. When it comes to Randall N Baer, obviously he was in the New Age community, although we don't know what his motives were for being in that community. And I can only assume, because of the, fast turnaround, and because of the, lack of validity to his story, that, there's no corroboration, that, he is like the many others who cash in on Christianity by giving the quote-unquote ex-occultist story without any real evidence to their occult experiences, nor to their quote-unquote scary or horrible experiences within the, occult community. His kind of meditation experience is very similar to Carol Kornacki's claims that she had more demons than hairs on someone's head. There's no corroboration to that statement. It's just something that's thrown out there to make the person seem credible as to their experiences in the New Age. Now, the meat of what Shaz says in this next clip basically is that neither Chris or myself is qualified to comment on a book we haven't read.
Now, if you're going to comment on something, or do a commentary on something, guys, you really need to be able to do so with some sort of authority, because you haven't even read the book. Now, you've said, Chris, that Anastasia Bluefire-Witch has been a practicing witch for 10 years and has never heard of the guy, and as though this somehow qualifies to comment on it without even reading the book.
See, the problem that I have with this statement is that neither Chris or myself ever claimed we were commenting on the book. We actually titled the video Randall N Baer, not his works. And so we were commenting on his supposed experience, which you had already outlined in your video. Our comment was on Randall N Baer and your speeches about him, not about his book in general. In fact, the comments that we took from Amazon and things like that weren't from his latest book. They were from one of his previous books. And so it really doesn't matter whether or not we've read his latest book. You have given us enough information to come to the conclusion that, Randall N Baer was not necessarily credible. Now, even if he did have this experience, one of the other things we were talking about is that, you're being kind of disingenuous to him being a quote-unquote influential leader in the New Age community. I don't quite understand why you would assume that we were just commenting on the book when we specifically said in the title of the video that we were commenting on Randall N Baer. So what I'm getting from this next statement is that Shaz is saying that Chris and I said that New Age and witchcraft aren't the same thing, and so therefore he's not sure why we feel the need to comment other than the fact that they actually are quite similar.
And being involved in witchcraft and the practices that you're involved in, and you say this yourselves in the video that you made, it's nothing to do with the New Age movements. They're familiar bedfellows, but it's nothing to do with that. And I feel as though you have to comment on it, but you don't really know why you're commenting upon it. But I think the very fact that you're commenting upon it goes to show that in your heart of hearts, you know that the New Age movements and witchcraft are connected.
No, actually, neither Chris nor I stated that the New Age movement had nothing to do with witchcraft. What we said was that the movement was too broad to really accurately, combine with witchcraft or the occult. But there are practices from both that are shared. There are also a lot of New Age practices which have nothing to do with witchcraft or paganism, or exclusively with witchcraft or paganism. For example, some people consider New Age to be astrology, when really astrology is actually an ancient art. But besides that, like I explained earlier, many people take these ideas that are from a certain culture, and even though they have nothing else to do with that culture, will use those techniques in their spiritual practices or spiritual pursuits, and regardless of their cultural origin. And, some of these practices are used in the pagan movement and some are not. But besides that, even if the two really did have nothing to do with each other, this is a video that we're doing to your audience because it's a response. And obviously, you make a connection to the New Age, to Wicca, and so does most of society. Otherwise, when we go into a Borders bookstore, we wouldn't see our books labeled under the New Age section. It's pretty obvious that most people make the connection between New Age, Wicca, paganism, etc., etc. Even though not all the practices that are considered quote-unquote New Age are actually, practiced within most of the witchcraft or pagan community. You walk into a Borders, though, and the Wiccan books and the pagan books are all under the heading New Age. Funny part is that last time I walked into a Barnes & Noble, the witches and the pagan books are over in the non-fiction section under New Age, and all the Christian books have been moved across the aisle to the fiction section, still under Christianity. I thought that was hilarious.
But I feel as though you guys feel like you're obliged to comment on this video on Randall Baer, and yet at the same time you're saying it's nothing to do with witchcraft and that the New Age movement is not a religion. I understand it's not a religion, it's a movement.
No, I think what Chris was saying when he was saying that, that New Age is not a religion, it's a movement, was commenting on a lot of the people within the Christian community who assume that New Age is a religion, and we have come across quite a few people within the Christian community that believe that. You see, what you do here is you answer your question that you'd posed before, which is what was the connection between the lack of connection between the witchcraft and pagan communities to the New Age that we were trying to kind of separate from in our last video. And that is that the New Age practices are not tied to any specific religion when used within the New Age movement. They may have come from a specific religion, but those people have nothing to do with that cultural basis or religion when using those practices. Now, witchcraft and paganism, obviously, paganism is a blanket term for a bunch of religious movements, and witchcraft is a practice used within religion. New Age isn't necessarily used with any specific religion. In fact, I know a lot of people who are Christian and do New Age practices. Now, Shaz here asks us why we only went to Amazon to read one review instead of balancing our reviews with people who claim to know Baer or finding works that actually, praised him and things like that. And so, well, you can just watch the clip.
But there was someone there that commented who claims to know him when he was involved in the New Age movement, when he was speaking, holding these seminars where there was hundreds of people. He knew him. He didn't bring that up. That comment there. Why didn't you bring that up? And also, if you want to take a good review, you shouldn't go to Amazon where you're going to find disgruntled people of all different types and persuasions who have an axe to grind. Why don't you go to a proper reviewer? I mean, even in the video I made, I mentioned a leading New Age journal that reviewed his books on crystals.
I quoted the review that I did because the person brought up a really good point from the, outsider's perspective when it comes to Christianity, which we're looking at this from an outsider's perspective. So I took that review because it was a very concise point on kind of like the observation that people who are outside the Christian community, who look in at the Christian community, see these quote-unquote ex-occultists and realize that they're cashing in. Regardless of whether or not somebody knew him or a journal read, praised his work, it is really kind of not the point that we were trying to make. Therefore, that's why I didn't quote them, because they weren't necessary. Nor are they any sort of proof that someone is influential or popular or successful within the movement. There's several quote-unquote institutions that people set up, for the New Age and stuff like that, and they do these things to make themselves seem credible. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're successful, because lots of people do it. And the simple fact that I hadn't heard of him is kind of obvious to the idea of how influential he actually was. Because, like I said, there are a lot of practices within the New Age movement which are akin to things that are done within witchcraft or paganism as spiritual practices that are tied to religion, whereas in the New Age movement, they're not done as any specific religious practice. And I'll give you an example. Now, Edgar Cayce, he was influential in the New Age movement. He's considered to be the father of holistic medicine. He was also a profound psychic, and he was a Christian. He read the Bible every day. And, the funny thing is that, he is very influential in the New Age movement. He doesn't really have anything to do with witchcraft or paganism. And, but at the same time, this New Age movement, when you think of New Age, Edgar Cayce, there's probably a picture of him in the dictionary if you looked up New Age. He was influential in the New Age movement. Randall N Baer, not influential in the New Age movement. Nobody's heard of him. Nobody that even has anything to really do with New Age or New Age practices probably knows that much about this guy unless, he personally knew him like this guy did. And as for a journal writing about his work, as Chris mentioned, just because somebody does a blurb about your work doesn't mean that they've even read it. I used to do movie reviews and I didn't even watch the whole movie. And a lot of times these things get handed down from publishers. Oh, read this book, read this snippet of this book, and do a blurb on it. And so they do that. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not really anything of substance. So here Shaz talks about what he considers to be the real reason why Randall N Baer wrote his book. He claims that Randall N Baer actually lost money by converting to Christianity, which we've already discussed. And also that, that we reject the notion that someone can, quote unquote, come out of the New Age or paganism and have a fulfilling life.
And that's the reason he's written this book, not to cash in. That's the reason why Christians make these videos like I'm making. People write these books. I think you guys are just, with all due respect, are just quite unaccepting of the fact that anyone can actually come out of this kind of stuff and have a fulfilling life as a Christian and rebuild their lives.
Now, Shaz, you're using the terminology, quote unquote, coming out of, this stuff, as you call it. And the thing that bothers me about that is that there is no coming out. I didn't go in. There's no door to enter. There's no, you just acquire knowledge. I'm not sure exactly how you can come out of knowledge. You acquire knowledge, you do practices and things like that. You practice this. There's no coming out of that. You act like it's some kind of addiction or some sort of barrier that you cross. And the whole idea that you use that type of terminology makes me think that you're less credible about your own experiences in the quote-unquote occult. Because nobody who's actually in the occult would try to use the terminology coming out. Because you either do something or you don't do it. There's no coming out of it. There's no coming out of knowledge. You either know something or you don't. So the whole idea that you have to quote unquote come out of that and then be saved by Christianity makes absolutely no sense to anybody who actually realizes what the occult, what New Age, what paganism, what witchcraft actually is. And that's why that hits to the heart of the issue of our disagreement here. And that is that anybody who uses that terminology of coming out is looking at it from a Christian perspective and never actually looked at it from the New Age perspective. Because if you did, you'd realize that there is no coming out of knowledge. Here Shaz plays what I would call the devil card. He says the devil is going to attack things like this.
But the devil is going to attack these kind of testimonies and spread controversy and confusion around, because he certainly, this guy ended up dying in suspicious circumstances.
I personally think it's completely disingenuous to bring the devil into this situation. And to say that the devil is going to attack things like this is just, uncorroborated, kind of speculation. And to say that he died of suspicious circumstances, well, Edgar Allan Poe died of suspicious circumstances, but let me tell you, it wasn't the devil. Have you ever thought that maybe these hallucinations that Randall N Baer had another explanation to them, and that is that a lot of people in the quote-unquote New Age movement, especially in the late 80s, had drug issues. A lot of the time when people are claiming to have demonic visions and stuff like this, and I'll go back to Carol Kornacki, who's an admitted drug user, there's a lot of drugs involved in the issue. And I can imagine that, and I haven't read the link or anything like that, but I can speculate and I can guess that Randall N Baer was not free of drugs at all points of his life. I can bet that he probably did drugs. I can bet that. So to blame a suspicious death on the devil, no, it doesn't really make much sense or carry much weight with me, or nor would it with anybody who really examines the circumstances, because I don't believe in the devil. The devil makes no sense. The devil makes no logical sense. And so to try to logically connect the devil to some kind of real life circumstance is ridiculous.
But it is a bit illogical. You do need to read the book, and you'd be pleasantly surprised. This guy's got incredible insight into the movement.
Well, I won't be purchasing the book anytime soon, because I have I don't purchase material that goes to Christian sources. I don't even donate to the Salvation Army. I'll donate to Goodwill or other charities, of course. I even donate blood every so often, but I do not purchase material that goes to Christian sources because it's counterintuitive. I wouldn't stab my own arm, so why would I, send money to an organization that's out to destroy what I stand for? It makes no sense. So no, I won't be purchasing the book anytime soon. But I've learned enough about what you know about the New Age to know that I'm not really going to trust your judgment on what is a credible insight to the New Age. But, patronize me for a moment. Give me some blurbs from the book that are what you call incredible insights to the New Age movement. I'd like to know what you think good insights to the New Age movement are. So be specific, please.
So, and again, with all respect, guys, that there was so much wrong with your video that I just had to say something in defense of this guy. He's dead now. Can't defend himself.
Well, Shaz, if my honest opinion is bad-mouthing, then so be it. I don't really feel guilty about that whatsoever, especially when faced with an individual who puts a book out there that I consider to be, not very credible because, he claims to be such an influential person, but yet I could find no evidence to suggest that he was very influential, regardless of the fact that he has one journal review and one friend on the internet. That doesn't make him an influential person. The fact that he's claiming to be influential means that he's talking to a different audience other than the New Age audience. He's talking to the Christian audience, trying to make money off the Christian audience. And I do believe that he's trying to make money. It seems pretty obvious that's what he's trying to do. And it seems pretty obvious that people who have these quote-unquote coming out stories, that's exactly what they're trying to do. In fact, I've outlined several big, similarities between these stories of people who, quote-unquote, come out of the occult or the New Age or witchcraft or paganism and stuff like that from a Christian perspective. And the fact that he's dead doesn't really matter to me. In fact, it didn't matter to you when you called Gerald Gardner a homophobe, or alluded to the fact that he was a homophobe, and also referred to Aleister Crowley as an infamous black magician instead of, a prophet, the start of a religion, or anything like that. So you disparaged those two people in two different videos. I disparaged Randall N Baer. I'll own up to that, but my conscience is clear. I feel fine with that. Anyway, I think this about covers your video. I'm so sorry about the length of this video, but there wasn't really much I could do about it. Anyway, blessed be.